By using a project contract, you can invoice one or several projects at a time. The project contract also helps make sure that a uniform invoice procedure is applied for each project or sub-project in the project structure. Each project that will be invoiced must be associated with a project contract, which means our external type projects require a project contract. Settings for a project contract apply to all projects and sub-projects that are associated to the project contract. So if I was going to learn project contracts, I'd be asking myself, what are some of the key features, or what does a project contract do for me? So the first thing to note that it does is it is a way to associate a customer to a project. So basically you define a contract, and one of the first values that you have to select is the funding type, and there's 4 different funding types, but for a basic project contract we'll just focus on customer. So you basically select your customer, and now your contract has some link to a billable resource, which would be the customer. Next, it allows you to bill for multiple projects through one invoice. So when you create that contract, the next step is to create a project. And when you create a project, and if it's an externally facing project, you are required to define a project contract. So you can have 1 or 1,000 projects that are assigned to one specific contract. When you're defining your contract, you also create the default billing information, and that's passed down to all the different projects that are associated with your contract. So you can define some tax defaults, pricing information such as cost and sales prices. So when we went through our course on sales prices and cost prices, we saw that you can select contract as one of the values when defining those. Invoice templates, so basically the printout, when you print an invoice, you can define the default value at the contract level. Also, if you have a negotiated rate, when it comes to exchange rates, you can set that at a contract level. Billing address as well. Terms and other payment defaults, and another key one is financial dimensions. You actually set those up at the contract level, and in some, I should say, at the funding source level within a contract, because when you actually run an invoice, there's situations where the financial dimensions off your funding source are used rather than a project's dimensions. And then the other key feature too is that you can review transactions and forecasts at the contract level, and this is a nice feature if you have a portfolio of projects tied to a contract. Basically, you can get an overview of all the transactions and forecasts of all those projects by going to the contract. Just wanted to talk through or diagram out basically a project contract so you can get a visual of what it means, I guess, in my eyes. So the first thing that you have is a project contract, so you can go create your project contract. And then basically when you're creating that contract, you're defining what the funding sources are. And again, for a basic scenario, we'll just say that a funding source is a customer, or you can actually have multiple customers as funding sources on one contract, where you can do like a split billing scenario. But we'll save that for the advanced course. So we just have one customer as a funding source, and then you can go ahead and define all the generic billing information that's associated with that contract, which we talked about on the previous slide. Then after you have your contract all set up from a billing information and funding source perspective, then you can start creating new projects. And when you create those projects, if they're externally facing, you can assign them to that contract that you have created. And what that means then is basically all your transactions you can review, whether they're forecasts or actual bookings. So that's why I have an arrow pointing up to that project transactions node from the contract, because now we can see all those different transactions. The general thing to understand is, well, A, funding sources are a way to relate a customer. B, when we go ahead and invoice, all that default invoice information is coming from your contract. And then C, you can have many projects associated with one contract. And then I guess finally D, the project transactions are reviewable at the contract level as well.